Hi, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the third meeting of the Public Policy Task Force. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we're here in Toronto, or Takaranto, as it was traditionally known, and it occupies a place that has been home to Indigenous peoples for over 15,000 years, the Huron-Wendat, Petun First Nations, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the New Credit River. This territory is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and the Haudenosaunee that bound them to share and protect this land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples and settlers from all over the globe have been welcomed into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. Takaranto is now home for many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. Recognizing this is but one of the many intentional acts for acknowledging injustices and committing ourselves individually and collectively as a university to the path of truth and reconciliation. I wanted to say that we have our project assistant, Natalie Tuari, here, and also our co-op student, Monica Daray. They are with us today, and you have been getting correspondence from me and from Naomi and from Chloe, but just wanted to highlight again, they were here last week, but they are responsible for coordinating and supporting the activities of the task force. So if you see emails from them, do note that they may be relevant to the task force. And so just wanted to make sure that you can feel free to reach out to them and develop a relationship with them if you feel you need any information or logistics about stuff. So we have two main meetings coming up, one on diversity and inclusion in the public policy space, and one on future leadership. I think we had initially intended that the diversity and inclusion piece was going to be this week, but because of presenters' schedules, we flipped them. This week, we're going to be discussing future policy leadership for Ryerson public policy. And so thank you for being here, and I'm going to turn it over to Naomi now.
Great. Thank you very much, Matthew, and welcome everyone. I'll just give you those now very familiar, but I'm going to repeat them anyway, housekeeping items. So if you're not speaking, please leave your microphone on mute. If you have headphones, please use them as they will reduce noise and echo. If you're experiencing any lag or difficulty with your sound quality, you can turn off the video option to see if that improves the quality, or please use the dial-in number to call in. We will also be keeping a speaking order list, so if you would like to speak, please indicate that in the chat. And if you have a question you would like answered, you can also type that into the chat. Monica and Natalie will be monitoring the chat for any questions and are available to assist you, like we noted, like Matthew noted just a moment ago, with any concerns or technical issues if they arise. So the agenda today, Matthew will be introducing our speaker in just a moment. What we're looking at today is what does future policy leadership at Ryerson look like? And as we did last time as well, we're going to, after the presentation, we'll move to breakout rooms. I want to know that we took your feedback seriously. We've extended the breakout rooms today to 30 minutes, given your healthy discussions last week that were cut off rather abruptly after 20. So we've added 10 more minutes because this is a vital time for you to engage. So we hope that this does help. Reminder that the meeting will conclude at 3:15. And we very much, again, look forward to making the most of our collective time today and hearing your insights and the insights of your group that you'll be bringing forward. I'd like to turn it back now to Matthew.
Thank you, Naomi. The task force is a significant investment of time and commitment, and these Zoom meetings are always a little bit awkward, but I am so excited that Vaas Bednar is joining us today in the spirit of raising unrealistic expectations, which nobody ever likes. Vaas is a super creative thinker and someone who I always learn from whenever I engage with her on issues of public policy and government. So we've sent around her bio. I'm not going to read it. She has done all kinds of interesting, incredible things at Queen's Park and City of Toronto and at U of T and at Airbnb, at an AI data company. And she's now working as executive director of a Master of Public Policy in Digital Society at McMaster University. She was an Action Canada Fellow, a Civic Action Diversity Fellow, and just really is interesting creative thinker about where the world of public policy is going and how researchers, institutes, students, faculty can all think about where things are going and the kinds of skills we're going to need and how we can engage. So with that, I know she's going to speak for 10 to 15 minutes and then we'll do our breakout. So I'll just turn it over to Vaas. And Vaas, thank you for being with us.
Well, thanks for having me. It's nice to see everyone. And also, if during my remarks you feel like turning your camera off, please, no hard feelings. We'll have them on for when we're chatting together. I totally get it. And feel free to use the chat if you want to private me message anything or put weird reactions or questions. I think it's all really good. I admire this task force that you're doing very much. I'm so appreciative of the invitation to think openly and freely in this kind of setting and kind of throw out my perspectives and ideas for you to fold in with alongside what you're hearing from everyone else. I do want to say, I mean, Matthew shared some background about me. You know, a lot of this thinking is colored, that I'm going to share is colored by some early time I spent at what was the School of Public Policy and Governance, later at a think tank at the Rotman Business School, and now navigating at McMaster in a remote and distributed way. So yes, thank you for letting me share this. And I wanted to give you that context in terms of some of that thinking as it goes to policy capacity, but also thought leadership. One major thing, I mean, it's not new to say that there are, increasingly maybe firm but somewhat artificial boundaries across campus that mimic the kind of silos or boundaries that frustrate us with government. I am observing that, mobilizing people around a common cause or the kind of hubs that you've been building, more neutral hubs at Ryerson, are very productive ways to engage people in policy thinking. But a challenge is that the academy in general, this is not like a Ryerson specific feedback, there's a tension between receiving what is the policy agenda and then being the broker, the kind of sense maker, hey, this is happening, let's do something that's more explanatory, let's bring people into the conversation. And also that trade-off with being an agenda setter or pushing. And I understand the challenges or limitations that might associate activism and advocacy on campus. But my broader observation is that increasingly we do elect thought followers, not thought leaders. And thought leadership is coming from far outside government. And what better place than our strong post-secondary institutions? The question there becomes, what are the incentives for sharing new thoughts, new ideas, kind of pushing things out there? And how do you balance the risks? So again, speaking freely and in a safe way, I have had conversations with pre-tenure faculty members who have cautioned me, they've got these ideas, they're working on certain things, but can we talk again in 3 years? Because they'll have more economic security and they'll feel safer being brave. That's a real tension that happens at universities. That inhibits the kind of, maybe the kind of scholarship, the kind of provocations that frankly robust public policy relies on. A second thing I wanted to share, I've sort of said tension and kind of polarizing bits. There's a really nice messy middle between this dominant student position and then experts. And I think we reduce the academy to those kind of two relationships. But there's a messy middle of those emergent practitioners, people who want to learn and engage a little bit more, but have an active role. So again, I've seen Ryerson and I've participated in sessions that get at this, but how do you both bring people along and engage them, but also give them voice? That is something that's challenging. And a small idea or an observation that I've seen out there that I really liked was around building out a consistent reading group. So say you put out a report and instead of having a webinar just on the report where you're presenting it and maybe taking a couple of questions, is there a way to facilitate something that's actually much closer to like a really great graduate tutorial with other people sharing their thoughts and reflecting on the paper? I mean, maybe it's because it's the pandemic, and I'm sorry, I don't know how to turn those alerts off, so I hear them too, and now they're in the recording. Oh well. That I think that's a way to engage more people, and maybe in a more productive way that can help drive that conversation. Universities have been very good at de-risking entrepreneurship, but they have not been as good at maybe de-risking that kind of policy thinking or policy thought when it comes to provocations or, being anticipatory. The other day, I think Kareem and I often mispronounce his name as Karim, we're talking about this newer emerging model, not of regulatory sandboxes, but of anticipators. So, is there a frame of being anticipatory where you can be truly cross-disciplinary and maybe that ties to some of the strategic foresight work and kind of looking ahead, but kind of, maybe that would be closest to policy horizons federally. That's more of kind of, let's scope that more later. It's underdeveloped as a thought, but it's where I could see Ryerson's work standing out on in a policy side and bringing more people in, because what you do by imagining future scenarios is you can kind of neutralize the thinking space because it's not something that's happening or being kind of brought to people live through the headlines. Matthew, not to pick on you or single you out, and don't worry, I don't have a call out for everyone because it is the worst when someone suddenly says your name on Zoom and you're just like, what? But you had a tracker of sorts when you were at the federal government that was color coded. It's hard to get the bigger picture as an average person of bigger policy agendas and where things are or how they're moving through. I do think that's something that can be decoded and demystified. We also talk a lot about what decision gets made, right? That's something we're all fascinated by. Okay, wow, the province is going to let people like buy alcohol from bars and restaurants, like yahoo. How do you create spaces to document and capture how the decision got made, right? That's really hard to demystify. That's really hard to broker. Maybe impossible. Maybe those sorts of things are totally protected by cabinet confidentiality. But policy gets made, accelerated, started in places other than cabinet. And that's another kind of way to talk about not what policy, but where policy. I've also subscribed to something. I know everyone's subscribing online for free or paid, but I don't know if anyone else subscribes to the syllabus. But it gets emailed to me once a week, and it's basically a curation of some of the best new readings on a particular topic that I like. I love that idea for a university to engage non-students in a syllabus of sorts. You don't have to go through the syllabus to get a badge on your LinkedIn. You don't have to show up in any one period of time, but you have this kind of curated, maybe with a touch of commentary, like literally 2 to 3 sentences. And it keeps you on the pulse of what's going on and kind of what's being proven. I think that's important because, one, I mean, I'm not an expert on how journalism is changing, but let's just be real. We're all getting our news in different ways and from different sources. And there's, different levels of trust with what's out there. So we've lost this kind of common common baseline of maybe what the quote unquote facts are. Being more specific, Anna, I could be more specific. Yes, okay, Anna, I'll pick up on that, and I appreciate that feedback. Anyway, back to the syllabus, and then you have a product or an artifact where, sometimes people want to be the learners in the room or engage, but again, there's that caution. If you're someone who works in the premier's office, or is at City Hall, down the street, do you want to show up on that Zoom and be like, oh, I want to go learn about this new thing? And people are going to think, shouldn't she, what is she doing here? Shouldn't she know about it? Doesn't she have expertise? So I wanted to highlight that also recognition of some of the risk of showing up, which I think we also don't always think about. And maybe that's just a different way to look and think about what it means to be part of an audience. And absolutely, different policy sectors have different connections with research. But I feel surprisingly confident saying that the bridge between the academy and the door of decision makers is an invisible and often imagined one. I have been in situations where the assumption is that because a paper is published in the Canadian Journal of Economics, the bomb is dropped, the work is done, wait till they get a load of this, here we go. And there's no either appetite for the translational work of op-ed, radio pitches, just translating and digesting for a different audience. We undervalue that translational communications work, and I think we've come to expect it from universities, for better or for worse. But I think it's really important. I think it's underinvested in, and one of the worst dimensions, I think, of public policy, most frustrating, challenging aspects, is patience, right? You have to be a patient person. You also have to be persistent and consistent. But sometimes in the setting of an academy, we have these blips and one-offs. So you don't build consistent relationships, which goes back to the reading group. Building out different types of reading groups that are well facilitated, that are free to attend, that occur at different times, to have people learn about cutting edge emergent research and help it be contextualized in a policy setting, but then, really have dialogue about what it means and what that actually looks like, could be productive. In terms of what your KPIs end up being, is it the number of people you engaged? I don't know. I think that maybe I'll like wrap up on this a bit so we can speak more. Yeah, policymakers do expect researchers to cover the entire distance, and that's ridiculous. But maybe we need a new kind of intermediary, or something else to pick that up, and maybe we could talk about that in the breakout rooms. Absolutely, that sometimes policymakers just want researchers to kind of give them that gold star and say, yeah, this is exactly what you should do. Just looking at my notes and thinking about what I'd like to wrap up on. We could probably do more, and I mean this as like us, as like, everyone. We could probably do more. I talked about that bridge from, scholars to decision makers, or that gulf. But, student work has a particular invisibility to it that is kind of confounding, because students are creating great work and products that they can keep for themselves, or put somewhere. But how do you showcase some of the best student work consistently? Often when you see students in like the daily news versions, it's for something that they've done in a leadership capacity, but their primary job as students is to be, they're producing material. They're producing material that often just gets lost in a file somewhere, or, backed up on their computer. And it would be interesting to think about how to create, robust portfolios for those people as they continue their journey, or kind of more shareables, because maybe that's another way, students I do think are underutilized as people producing ideas or briefs that could be productive elsewhere, which is not to say their work should be sold or bartered or monetized in any way. But I do think it's a resource. And I will say, I taught as a sessional this summer, and I found the work of the students to be very high caliber. I loved reading and reviewing it, and I got to learn something too. Who else can learn from that? You know, where else should that go? Maybe it's top papers. Maybe it's a nice incentive for students. Maybe it picks winners, but that's something else. I'm going to wrap up there so that I'm going to trouble for speaking too long. I hope I've said enough for us to have a really cool time talking. And yeah, I'm loving the comments. Yeah, why not expect more from policymakers? I mean, I know you guys have lots of better insights from people who have been on the political side of policymaking and the civil servant side, but I've also observed how, okay, this is what I'm going to leave us with. We understudy and underappreciate the kind of corporate communication, strategic communications, campaign dimension of policymaking. And when you're in the thick of it, you see the kind of strange power that a letter writing campaign has, or, you know, consistent headlines in the Toronto Star making the top of your briefing, you know, your morning briefing with your minister. Maybe that ends up being like an outdated way to engage on policy. But with digital tools, we have, you know, increasingly sophisticated information about people, micro-targeting, you know, polls on how to appeal to or manipulate people's emotions. And I think if we don't talk about and evaluate and capture those campaigns in an academic way, we ignore the very real power that they have to influence policy outcomes. So I'd love to see more on that. And I think the creative assets and cross-disciplinary ability at Ryerson is actually well suited to that. Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking with you more. Of course, if and as I have more ideas, which I'm sure will happen, I have the right contact information, and I do have remarks to follow up in writing so that they're well captured. Though I know you're recording me, you don't have to watch it again. Yeah.
Vaas, that was incredible. So much food for thought. I very much look forward to the sessions now. Thank you so much. Just again, those little bits of housekeeping. Like last time, you'll be placed into your breakout room. You should recognize at least many of the people with you. They should be the same rooms. And you have already, of course, received the biographies of everybody in your group. So just remember again to please select one person as you step into the room who will report back. And we're hoping that when we return together that you have basically 2 key points that you want to bring to the group at minimum, but also sometimes perhaps even at maximum 2 ideas to bring back to the group. And just remember as well, each group will have a designated note taker who will be drafting the minutes from those sessions. Vaas and Matthew and I will be joining as observers, and we'll be leaving one room and attending a second room at about the halfway point. So without further ado, let's move to Brian, our media expert. Well, that was tremendous. From what bits and pieces I saw, I'm very much looking forward to the summaries and takeaways from each of the groups. So welcome back, everyone. And I'd like to go around and ask each group to provide their feedback to the rest of this this task force membership. Could we begin with group? Very innovative. Group number 1, if you would like to get started.
Yeah, and I'm from group number 1. I'd like to suggest that Rachel does our overview. If that's all right, Rachel.
Wow, okay. Actually, unfortunately, I have to go pick up my kids. I didn't see the time and they get out of school in 2 minutes, so I need to run, but I appreciate everything today.
Okay, no worries then. I suppose I can do it. I mean, we talked a little bit about the dialogue between policy and research, and I think several of us emphasize that Ryerson is not in the ivory tower, and rather is quite close to policymakers. And Wendy was pointing out that several of our colleagues, including herself, are very much concerned and interested in affecting change, and they are activists in different fields. We talked a little bit about the importance of generally communicating, like getting the word out through media and social media, which can can create pressure to policymakers to do something. So in some fields, this is very important, like fields where the consumers, if you want, have a big impact on industry and on regulation. And I think we were also warned about the the opportunities, but also the challenges of using, for instance, visualization to communicate our research, and how sometimes the effort to make things visualizable, so use a graph or an image to help us understand a complex set of relationships, is also at the same time a little bit risky, because it could eventually send the wrong message, make things appear very simple. I think these were our three main takeaways, and if anyone else wants to add. No, I think I did a good job.
Great, Anna, thank you so much. Can we turn to group number 2 now?
I was thinking I was group 3, but I'm group 2. So I was, I guess, elected to make the presentation. Everyone else opted out. So we had a bit of a discussion. We went around the room. We certainly, within the discussion, came out that there's a lot of expertise at Ryerson. There's people doing a lot of good stuff in terms of policy and so forth. We really have a larger question, and we really think it's a question for the task force leaders. We're confused. We just don't know what the problem is we're trying to solve. And so that was one of the problems we had. Not the speaker did a great job of giving an interesting talk. It was hard to have a discussion based on that in the work group, because we're back to what end? Where are we going with this? What's the purpose of this? What are we trying to come up with? And I think there was a collective feeling on the committee, not just for me, but others can pipe up if I'm misrepresenting, of what are we trying to fix here? And then maybe we could give more focused advice on what we think a solution would be. But we're very confused about where we're trying to go. And we know we're trying to go somewhere, because this is a huge task force with a huge number of committee members, incredible resources given to the task force to do this, a 7, 8, 9 month project. You don't do this if you haven't come to the conclusion that there's some big problem that needs to be fixed, and there needs to be some resources and attention given to it. But at least on my part of this task force, the subgroup I'm on, we just don't know where this is going. I was saying, if I was the professor in the class and a student gave a presentation like this, I would say, well, it's a lot of interesting ideas, but it's kind of all over the place. It's scattergun, it's unfocused, it's hard to go anywhere with this. We know you guys are better than that. So I think you need to help us help you better, because I think a lot of us are confused. So I'll stop there. If any committee member thinks I've misrepresented anything, please jump in or add or supplement.
Okay, thank you very much, Ron. Committee group number 3. We could just give
Matt
your
Baker
summary.
here from group 3. So our discussion echoed many of the concerns raised by Vaas on bridging the gap between researchers and public policymakers, which merged us into the theme of getting translated knowledge into the hands of the general public and ultimately public policymakers. Josephine from our group made the point that far too often public policy doesn't quite involve the public or our experts, and it also neglects marginalized communities. We kind of narrowed it down to 2 kind of pieces of advice. researchers need more resources to turn information into manageable bits, and researchers from within Ryerson should begin with who's in our own community at Ryerson. And that falls into scientists and researchers. They're doing a lot of work and they're distracted and they don't have the time to be on social media or Twitter and all of those things to get it out to the public or to explain it to the public policymakers. So there's opportunity for more to do under that.
That's great. Thank you very much. Could we hear from group number 4?
Yes, I'll speak for group number 4, and I'll just start with a point that the third group made that was echoed in my group as well, which is the availability of time. So the idea was most people at Ryerson don't have enough time to dedicate to the translation work that's required to get this kind of policy intervention going. Related to that is the incentive structure, which somebody else brought up. So if you're going to be allocating some of your time to doing this kind of work, the idea is that it should be rewarding in some way, but given the incentive structure, especially for pre-tenure faculty, we got the sense that maybe people are not particularly motivated to do the work if it doesn't count as much as say, publications in traditional journals. So that was another issue that we talked about. We also discussed some challenges that younger sort of researchers or graduate students might face navigating the public space. So which relates to the idea of whose voice is being heard when it comes to policy research, what kinds of people are privileged in those spaces, and whether there's anything we can do to sort of introduce researchers to certain channels for getting their voices heard about some of these issues. Because, and this was my personal observation, which is that there are a lot of people who are interested in this kind of work, but some people may not necessarily know how to navigate those spaces. Corinne was, it did post a link to policyresponse.ca, which is first policy response, and that relates primarily to COVID. But for other issues that may not necessarily be about COVID, it would be maybe useful to have some information available to researchers at Ryerson about how to navigate these issues. Finally, there was a question about how much interest there is from policymakers in hearing academic voices on these specific issues. So the idea is why, maybe it relates to the issue in group 2 as well. Is anybody looking to hear voices? Is anybody asking, that they're somewhat missing? They have a gap that they think we can fill. So that was something else that we thought might be useful. That's all from group 4.
Thank you very much. That's great. I see that there's comments in the chat, but I'm wondering if anybody in the last remaining couple of minutes would like to comment or ask any further questions. I saw some nods along the way. So if anybody wants to make a comment or ask a question.
Well, it sounds like there's some uncertainty amongst task force members in terms of how maybe they can best plug in or what they should be listening for when you hear from others. So I'm glad to hear that reflected, so that I'm not sure, you can think about your problem brief or that problem statement or, key prompting questions if you want to have those consistently across people. And then keep reflecting on how and when you're engaging others on your thinking as you move forward. I think the word problem came up a couple of times. I'll just share, to my mind, there's not necessarily any problem at all, right? It seems like a thinking exercise and a thinking opportunity to try new things, stay current, stay relevant. When I chaired the expert panel on youth employment, I was often asked, why now? Like, what's different now? And it's fascinating to look over generations at the remarkable resilience of our post-secondary institutions. But I do think Ryerson has been doing so much for part-time students, people learning online, continuing education, new ways to engage people. And to my mind, this is just complementary and reinforcing to some of that thinking. You're already doing tons of this work. You're not starting from scratch by any means. To my mind, you're thinking about, as an institution, how do you take a more holistic approach that's meaningful and relevant? And I wish you luck with it. I'm so excited to see what you do with it, and I'll keep my eyes posted for what comes of it.
Vaas, thank you so much. I noticed that there were some hands up, but I wasn't clear that which hands were up. Okay, Anna, please.
Yeah, I think I have a question to you, Naomi and Matthew. So what is our, and I think we've discussed this 2 meetings ago, not in the last meeting, I believe. What do we try? Because I think what I hear is we are experienced, we are branded in being a university that speaks to, we often like to say we speak to the labor market, but generally we speak to real life, to real people. We don't have this, or we have less this challenge of being a little bit detached from the everyday realities. So what do we try to achieve more? I mean, I heard in our breakout group, and it's a pity that Rachel had to go. So and I think also Wendy mentioned it, so that there are very good initiatives that happen in specific faculties or with regard to specific areas of research. So are you trying to get information from us, like input, feedback on what do we think works and what doesn't? Are you, so I'm really not clear what we're trying to achieve and why this is best achieved through meetings. Because of course, this is my own view. I feel that, okay, you do a meeting, you do a little bit of brainstorming, you exchange some ideas, etc. And then somebody, which I would think it's you, Naomi and Matthew, goes back to the drawing board and says, okay, you guys have this task. We need reinforcement in these trenches. We need reinforcement in those trenches. So you guys go away with 3 months, 4 months, 1 month more, 1 year, and you come back with some things that you've done and some, output and outcome. So anyhow.
Naomi, can I don't want to step on people because I wanted to engage with Ronald's comments and now Anna's, but if there are other hands, I know we're running out of time, but I want to give others a chance to speak. Was there someone else?
Murtaza, and just want to say 2 things, that we would appreciate a document that explains what this group is supposed to do, why it has been assembled, and more importantly, how it has been assembled. Ryerson is a large place with about 800 professors. It is made aware and made known to me that the engineering colleagues and science colleagues perhaps are not as adequately represented in this group in terms of numbers. And as I mentioned, and I can share my slides with the group, bulk of research we produce at Ryerson comes from engineering and sciences. And therefore, if you want to be interested in making Ryerson's research accessible, you have to at least be inclusive of those who are doing research that you want to publicize and make it to the. So the rationale of the group, how it got constituted, why, for instance, I'm invited, why someone else is not, what problem we are trying to fix, and what contributions we will make, and how this group was put together, how people were excluded, for instance, let alone included, would be very helpful for all of us for future deliberations. I came late to the group through a follow-up invite, so I'm ignorant, maybe you guys know more, but something on paper rather than discussion would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. I see that Josephine's hand is up if you would like to speak.
I'm typing it into the chat so someone else can speak. Thank you.
Okay, Matthew?
So this is helpful. We can take this away and see if, meetings can, whether it's through more sharing of documents, or maybe Anna suggests fewer meetings. I mean, we can take that away and let's take this input and see how to move forward. And some of the questions that Mutaza has raised as well. I do want to engage though with Ronald's point a bit more directly. And the task force, and I'm just giving you my own sense of this, I do not believe that there is a problem that we are trying to solve, that there is a problem statement. This has come up previously in previous meetings. And, I think I've said it before, I don't know that the president or the vice president, certainly not me, I won't speak for Naomi, has a particular problem or problems that we are trying to solve or that have been identified. That isn't how I think how the group was set up or constituted. I think the rationale is that there is an opportunity at the moment to reflect on what we're doing well, whether there are new resources that are needed to amplify our work, whether there are new networks or partnerships that the university can help with, whether there are new communication services or opportunities that can be created. The task force was explicitly constructed in two phases. This is a discovery phase. The first half and the second half, we will get more to advice and recommendations. I, again, don't have in my head, and I doubt Naomi does, or Stephen or Mohammed, that they're expecting X or Y or Z to emerge from this. I think the goal is to find out what we think we're doing well, what we think we need help with, whether there are things that the university can help with. I'm new to Ryerson, and so perhaps other people are learning all of these things. Perhaps everyone knows these things already, but Murtaza was telling a story about the connection between engineering and his research and public policy, and was making a point that internally to Ryerson, individual faculties or centers aren't familiar with what others are doing within the university, and that there are linkages and networks that could be created. And he was surprised that people with public policy expertise may not know what he's doing. And so that just raises the question, is there something the university can do to amplify internal communications, networking, knowledge within the university, so that researchers and faculty can better understand what is going on at Ryerson, let alone externally? I think we are trying to, and I would say over the last 3 meetings, I've found 20 or 25 useful points like that I think are important, that can nuance or contextualize the work we're doing. So that's my perspective. It may not satisfy you, Ronald. I'm sorry about that, but let's take this away and think about whether we can have more pointed questions or more documents to share, because I heard what you said, Ronald, and obviously that reflects the views of others. But I just want to say, I don't think there is a problem that has motivated this. I just think that we're at a civilizational moment around a whole series of issues around climate and racial justice and reconciliation and tech and democracy and inequality. And there are engineering solutions and science solutions and sociology solutions that can be brought to bear on these things. And I think the leadership at the university was wondering whether there's more we can do, or do it better, or amplify what's already going on, or address problems, make it easier for researchers and centers to have an impact, to engage, to build partnerships with community organizations or governments. So a bunch of questions rather than a particular problem. But let's take that away, and we can think about that over the holidays and see how we want to approach some of these questions in January. So I don't know if Naomi, should I just wrap up or?
Yes. Yeah, I was just going to say, please do wrap up. Thank you.
I know we're a bit late. Sorry, I went on and on, but the points both from Ronald and from others, merited more full engagement. So those are my perspectives. And you can reflect on those as well, whether you find those satisfying or not. Whether you do, it doesn't really. Well, we'll reflect on them as well and see what we do in January. So thanks, Vaas. Thank you, Anna, for those. I'm seeing you as well, but Murtaza, others who are engaging and being, I think, constructively critical about, and Ronald obviously, about the discussion and the process. And I know I speak for Naomi and the others that we're very keen on constructive, critical feedback on the process, because we want the outcome to be one where everyone sees themselves reflected, but that we're providing an outcome that is good for the university and for faculties and for centers. So thank you very much. I'll stop talking. Have good holidays, everyone. Get some.
Thank you very much, everyone.